Imagine waking up one day beside someone who swears they love you. Their hand is warm, their smile soft, yet inside you there's a restless whisper. Do they really love me? Or will they leave the moment I let down my guard? You smile back, but the smile feels rehearsed. You hug them, but the embrace carries a secret tension, like armor pressed against flesh. Deep down, you don't feel held, you feel tested. Every word they say becomes a puzzle to decode. Did they mean that? Or was there something underneath? Are they here because they want me, or because they pity me? And in this quiet, invisible war inside your chest, you realize something terrifying. You are not simply loving them, you are loving through the shadow of everything that once broke you. Isn't it strange? We speak of love as if it were natural, instinctive, flowing easily from one soul to another. Yet for many, love is not a gentle current, but a battlefield scarred by memories. We long to surrender, yet we grip tightly. We crave closeness, yet we flinch at intimacy. We desire trust, yet we sabotage it before it can bloom. Here lies the paradox. The very thing we yearn for most, love, becomes the thing we fear the deepest. We hunger for connection, but past wounds transform that hunger into suspicion, control, or withdrawal. It is as though trauma quietly rewinds the heart, teaching it to confuse affection with danger, intimacy with risk, vulnerability with weakness. But what is love then, if filtered through the eyes of the wounded? Is it truly love, or merely the reenactment of pain wearing the mask of desire? And if so, how can one ever tell the difference? Consider this. Maybe you've walked into relationships not because you were free to love, but because some part of you sought to replay an old story, hoping, this time, for a different ending. Maybe the people you choose are not accidents, but echoes of those who once hurt you. Perhaps the comfort you feel with them is not comfort at all, but familiarity with chaos. If love is shaped by our wounds, then do we ever truly choose our partners? Or do our scars choose them for us? What if every kiss carries the weight of every abandonment you've ever known? What if every silence reminds you of the nights when no one came to your aid? What if your way of holding someone is not simply affection, but also a desperate plea? Don't leave me. Don't hurt me. Prove I'm worth staying for. This is where the great question begins to burn. Is it possible to truly love when trauma has been our teacher? Or is what we call love nothing more than survival dressed in tenderness? The unsettling truth is this. You may not even know how much your trauma has shaped the way you love. You may think you're choosing freely, but perhaps you're still bound to the past, loving not as you are, but as you were wounded. And so the stage is set. To understand why love feels both irresistible and unbearable, both saving and suffocating, we must descend into the hidden roots, where psychology, memory, and philosophy intertwine. For only by seeing the unseen can we begin to answer the question, what does it mean to love truly when the heart itself has been scarred?
To grasp how trauma reshapes love, you must first understand this. Trauma does not vanish when the event ends. It lingers, not as memory alone, but as architecture. It builds scaffolding inside the psyche, bending how you interpret faces, words, silences, and even tenderness. Carl Jung once wrote that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. When it comes to love, trauma is that unconscious force, quietly steering the wheel while you believe you're driving. You think you chose your partner because of chemistry, timing, or destiny, but often you were pulled by invisible strings tied to your unhealed wounds. Consider attachment theory, born from the research of John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth. As children, we learn what love feels like, not from poetry or movies, but how our caregivers respond to us. If they held us consistently, we learned love as safety. If they withdrew, criticized, or abandoned us, we learned love as volatility, unpredictability, or absence. And here lies the haunting truth. As adults, we unconsciously seek out what feels familiar, not necessarily what is healthy. A child who equates love with chaos may grow into an adult who finds peace boring, stability threatening, and kindness suspicious. Arthur Schopenhauer spoke of love as nature's trick to ensure the survival of the species. But trauma complicates this biological imperative. It doesn't merely drive us toward connection, it distorts our compass. We may feel irresistibly drawn to those who resemble our earliest experiences, even when those experiences left us broken. The body whispers, "This is love." The mind insists, "This is destiny." But in truth, it may only be repetition compulsion, the psychological need to replay old wounds in the hope of rewriting their endings. Sigmund Freud, despite his controversies, identified this cycle. The traumatized person will unconsciously gravitate towards situations that mirror the original wound. A neglected child may chase after emotionally distant lovers. A betrayed child may distrust every gesture of loyalty, testing it until it collapses. Love becomes less about union and more about reenactment, a theater where unresolved pain writes the script. But trauma does not only shape who we love, it shapes how we love. It creeps into the smallest gestures, the way you text back with hesitation, fearing rejection if you answer too quickly. The way you withdraw in arguments, not because you don't care, but because silence once protected you. The way you overgive, not from abundance, but from terror that withholding will drive them away. Jean-Paul Sartre argued that relationships are inherently poisoned by the struggle for recognition, that we seek to be seen completely by another, yet are forever confined within our own subjectivity. Add trauma to this existential dilemma and the struggle intensifies. To love is no longer just the desire to be seen, it becomes the desperate demand to be healed through another's gaze. But can another truly heal you? Or is that demand itself another trap? Viktor Frankl, survivor of the Holocaust, wrote that suffering ceases to be suffering the moment it finds meaning. Perhaps love becomes distorted when we demand that our partners supply meaning to wounds that only we ourselves can confront. When we conflate healing with romance, we risk turning lovers into saviors and relationships into rescue missions. And here lies the deeper philosophical problem. Trauma robs us of freedom in love. We believe we are choosing, but our choices are conditioned. Nietzsche warned against living in chains disguised as preferences. He wrote of the eternal recurrence. Would you live your life exactly as it is, over and over? For many traumatized lovers, the answer is tragically yes, not by will, but by compulsion. They recreate the same dynamics, suffer the same endings, and mistake the cycle for fate. But this hidden force does not reveal itself easily. It disguises itself as attraction, intuition, or even true love. It convinces you that the familiar ache in your chest is passion, when it may be nothing more than fear disguised as desire. So the hidden problem is not simply that trauma shapes how you love. It is that trauma convinces you that its distortions are love itself. Until this illusion is shattered, you remain captive, repeating the past while believing you are building a future. And this realization opens the next door. If trauma scripts our love stories, what are the consequences? What happens when entire lives are built upon these hidden distortions? When families, marriages, and generations inherit wounds disguised as romance? To see this, we must step into the shadows of consequence, where love and trauma ripple far beyond the self, reshaping not only relationships, but society itself.
Imagine two people falling in love, both carrying invisible scars. At first, the wounds are silent. The chemistry is intoxicating, the attraction undeniable. But slowly, without either of them realizing, their traumas begin to dance together, like ghosts pulling the strings of a play neither auditioned for. This is the unseen consequence. Trauma is not passive. It doesn't stay locked away in the vault of memory. It leaks into the present, staining the way we interpret gestures, silences, and choices. It becomes the lens through which we filter reality. And when two lenses distort at once, entire relationships bend into shapes that feel suffocating, chaotic, or doomed. Psychologists call this trauma reenactment. A person abandoned as a child may unconsciously provoke distance, interpreting every delayed text as proof of betrayal. Another, raised amid criticism, may shrink from expressing needs, believing love must be earned by self-erasure. Two such people can spend years mistaking each other's wounds for malice, not realizing they are fighting not each other, but the echoes of past ghosts. The consequence is subtle but devastating. Partners become actors in roles they never intended to play. A lover who withdraws during conflict is not cold. They may be reenacting the silence of a parent who once ignored their tears. A partner who clings desperately is not needy. They may be echoing the child who once cried for help and was left unheard. And yet, because these wounds are unspoken, couples fight the wrong battles. They argue over dishes, texts, or tone of voice, never realizing the battlefield is not the present, it is the past replaying itself in real time. On a personal level, the consequence is exhaustion. Loving through trauma feels like walking a tightrope. Every step is tentative, every gesture burdened with hidden meaning. You may find yourself overanalyzing, mistrusting, or overcompensating, draining your energy until love feels less like joy and more like survival. But on a societal level, the consequences run even deeper. Consider this. If trauma shapes how individuals love, then generations inherit not just genes, but patterns. A parent who cannot trust intimacy may raise children who grow up fearing closeness. A couple locked in cycles of abandonment and control may model that dynamic for their children who later replicate it in their own relationships. Thus, trauma becomes cultural, passed down not only through blood, but through behavior. This is where the philosopher Aldous Huxley's warning becomes chillingly relevant. Experience is not what happens to a man. It is what a man does with what happens to him. Trauma, unprocessed, becomes inheritance. And in this sense, the most devastating consequence of trauma in love is not what it does to you, but what it seeds into the future. Neurologically, this inheritance is even more literal than once believed. Research into epigenetics shows that trauma can alter gene expression, meaning the scars of one generation may biologically prime the next for heightened fear responses, anxiety, or mistrust. Love, then, is not simply an emotional transaction, it is a biological and cultural relay. When trauma remains unhealed, love itself becomes a carrier of wounds. And there is yet another unseen consequence: the narrowing of possibility. Trauma convinces you that love must look a certain way, familiar, patterned, predictable. You may dismiss partners who are stable as boring, mistaking safety for dullness. You may crave volatility, equating it with passion. In this way, trauma quietly erases entire paths of intimacy you never explore, binding your life to a smaller circle of possibility than you ever imagined. Jean-Paul Sartre spoke of bad faith, the condition of living dishonestly, trapped by roles and self-deceptions.
In love shaped by trauma, bad faith takes the form of pretending you are free while being bound to repetition. You call it choice, but in truth, it is compulsion. And the cruelest part is this: trauma hides in plain sight. It convinces you the problem is your partner, your timing, your bad luck. Rarely does it reveal that the real architect is the past itself, scripting your present with invisible ink. So what happens when entire societies are built upon unresolved trauma? Divorce rates climb, families fracture, cynicism toward love grows. People retreat into isolation or numb themselves with distraction. Love becomes commodified, swiped, traded, consumed, while the deeper hunger for genuine connection goes unfulfilled. The unseen consequences are everywhere, and yet they are never named. They hide behind phrases like, "we grew apart," or "it just didn't work out." But beneath those words lies the silent hand of wounds never healed, dictating endings before beginnings even had a chance. And so we arrive at a critical moment. If trauma continues to script our love stories, then love itself remains a prison. But what if there is another path? What if the chains of repetition could be broken and love reimagined, not as reenactment, but as freedom? This is where rebellion begins. Not against love, but against the illusions trauma has wrapped it around. To move forward, we must ask, how does one break free from a script written in pain?
Breaking free from trauma's grip on love does not begin with romance. It begins with rebellion. A rebellion not against partners or relationships, but against the silent scripts written by the past. Imagine standing on a stage where the same play has been performed for decades. The roles are predictable: the abandoned lover, the anxious pursuer, the silent withdrawer. You know your lines before the curtain rises. The rebellion is the moment you step off that stage, tearing up the script, refusing to act out what was handed down to you. But how? The first act of rebellion is awareness. To see your patterns is to strip trauma of its disguise. Carl Jung believed that healing begins when the unconscious is brought into consciousness. That moment when you realize, I am not drawn to this person because they are my type. I am drawn because they echo my wound. That is the crack in the cycle. Awareness does not heal everything, but it breaks the spell of blind repetition. The second act of rebellion is radical self-honesty. This means facing the uncomfortable truth that much of what you've called love may have been survival in disguise. The clinging, the testing, the overgiving, these were not pure affection, but strategies to avoid abandonment, rejection, or pain. To admit this is painful, yes, but it is also liberating. For once you know what love is not, you open the door to discovering what love can truly be. The third act of rebellion is learning to sit with discomfort. Trauma teaches the nervous system that vulnerability equals danger. As a result, safety feels boring, even threatening. True rebellion is enduring the awkward, unsettling quiet of stability and learning not to run from it. It is resisting the impulse to chase the high of chaos, instead letting safety stretch your nervous system until it feels natural. Nietzsche once said, one must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. The rebellion is not about erasing chaos. It is about choosing when and how it expresses itself, rather than letting it dictate your destiny. But rebellion is not only inward. It requires reimagining love itself. Viktor Frankl argued that meaning, not pleasure, is the ultimate human pursuit.
In this sense, love shaped by trauma is shallow because it chases relief, relief from loneliness, fear, or emptiness. True love, by contrast, is chosen not from desperation, but from freedom. It is not, "I need you to heal me," but "I choose to walk with you as I heal myself." History offers examples of such rebellion. Consider Rainer Maria Rilke, who wrote of love as two solitudes that protect and border and greet each other. His words defy the trauma-driven idea that love must complete us. Instead, he envisioned love as the meeting of two whole beings who remain distinct. This vision is radical. Love not as fusion born of need, but as partnership born of freedom. Psychologically, rebellion also means learning the language of the body. Trauma is not just memory, it lives in the nervous system. Practices such as mindfulness, somatic therapy, or even breath work help rewire the body's alarm systems, teaching it that closeness need not equal danger. Each time you remain present instead of shutting down, each time you speak honestly instead of withdrawing, each time you embrace vulnerability instead of hiding, you're teaching your body that love is safe. The rebellion may also require grief. To heal, you must mourn not only the traumas themselves, but also the years of love lost to them. You must grieve the relationships that failed because you were playing out old scripts. This grief is not weakness, it is purification. As philosopher Soren Kierkegaard suggested, despair can be the doorway to authenticity if faced fully. By grieving, you honor the weight of what was lost, and in doing so, free yourself to create what can be found. But perhaps the greatest act of rebellion is reclaiming choice. Trauma tells you that you are doomed to repeat, that your desires are chains, that your fate is sealed. The rebellion is the quiet, stubborn act of saying, "I will choose differently." Even if every cell in your body longs for the familiar ache of chaos, you pause, you breathe, you step toward the unknown. This is not an easy path. It demands courage, the courage to be misunderstood, to be alone for a while, to endure the silence that comes with breaking old habits. But it is in this silence that love can be reborn. Not the counterfeit love of reenactment, but the genuine love of freedom. Rebellion, then, is not loud, it is subtle. It is the quiet refusal to let the past dictate your future. It is choosing to sit with safety until it feels like home. It is daring to love not from hunger, but from abundance. And if rebellion is possible, then so is transformation. Which brings us to the final realization, the ultimate truth about love, trauma, and the human capacity to rise beyond both.
Picture this. You were standing in front of a mirror. For years, every time you looked into it, you didn't see yourself. You saw your trauma, the frightened child, the abandoned lover, the silenced voice. Every gesture, every choice in love was shaped by these ghosts staring back. But imagine, for the first time, the mirror begins to clear. The faces fade, the distortions soften. For the first time, you see not your wound, but yourself. This is the ultimate truth. Trauma shapes the way you love, yes, but it does not define your capacity to love. The scars are real, but they are not the whole story. For too long, you believed that love was either salvation or destruction, that it would either rescue you from your pain or repeat it endlessly. But love, in its truest form, is neither savior nor executioner. Love is a choice, a creation, a living act of freedom. Trauma may have written the first chapters of your story, but you hold the pen for what comes next.
Think of Nietzsche's idea of amor fati, the love of fate, to embrace not only the joys of life, but also the suffering, not as obstacles, but as necessary threads in the fabric of your becoming. To love is not to erase trauma, nor to deny it. It is to look at your wounds and say, this too belongs to me. This too has shaped me. And still, I choose to love. The final realization is that trauma does not vanish. It transforms. It can become wisdom, empathy, depth. The very pain that once distorted your love can become the soil in which a more authentic love grows. If unhealed, trauma breeds repetition. If faced, it breeds resilience. If embraced with awareness, it deepens the well from which you love. And so, the most powerful realization is this. True love begins only when you stop demanding that another person heal your wounds. It begins when you stand before your scars, acknowledge them fully, and then choose to love anyway. Not from desperation, but from freedom. Imagine two people who have done this inner work. When they meet, they do not cling to each other like lifeboats in a storm. They stand like two trees, rooted in their own soil, and yet their branches intertwine. Their intimacy is not fusion born of fear. It is connection born of choice. They do not need each other to survive, and precisely because of this, their love is alive, expansive, untethered by desperation. This is what Rilke meant when he wrote that love is two solitudes that protect, border, and greet each other. Trauma seeks to erase solitude through fusion, fearing abandonment. True love honors solitude while still choosing togetherness. It is paradoxical, yes, but in that paradox lies freedom. To reach this place, you must pass through the fire of self-confrontation. You must unmask the illusions, mourn the losses, endure the silence, rebel against the scripts. But on the other side of this journey, you arrive at a love no longer defined by survival, but by creation. A love that does not ask, "Will you save me?" but declares, "I will walk beside you as we save ourselves." And perhaps this is the most beautiful irony. The very trauma that once made love unbearable becomes the reason your love is profound. Because you have known what it means to be unseen, you know the sacredness of truly seeing another. Because you have carried abandonment, you honor presence with reverence. Because you have touched despair, you understand joy not as shallow pleasure, but as miracle. The final, most powerful realization is that trauma does not vanish. It transforms. It can become wisdom, empathy, depth. The very pain that once distorted your love can become the soil in which a more authentic love grows. If unhealed, trauma breeds repetition. If faced, it breeds resilience. If embraced with awareness, it deepens the well from which you love. And so, here you stand, at the threshold of your own heart. Behind you are the ghosts, the cycles, the wounds. Ahead of you is a horizon unwritten. The choice is yours, to remain in the repetition or to step into freedom. The mirror clears. The pen rests in your hand. The question remains, how will you choose to love now?